Hi, I'm Greg Howlett, and I want to take a moment and talk to you about a very important topic for church pianists in particular, and that is transitions between songs. That is the situation where you're doing songs in church back to back, and you have to play music to get from one song to the next. That's a very trendy thing in churches. You're probably doing that in your church already. If you're like most church pianists, though, that's a little intimidating. And there's a reason why. It really comes down to this. When you're doing those transitions, you have very little control over what's happening, over the length and other factors. And you also have to do a lot of things. You have to change tempos and keys and styles and even time signatures and so on. So there's a lot going on. It's pretty complicated and you have very little control. If you are one of those musicians that sort of struggles with transitions, first of all, you're not alone. Secondly, I want to talk through the 6 tips and demonstrate the 6 tips that I put on my blog last week, and I got the request to demonstrate them, so I thought I'd do a quick video to do that. So we'll go through and show you exactly what I was talking about when I was writing. The first tip really doesn't have to be demonstrated. It's simply this. Make sure that you know what's coming. Okay, so don't just go in and fly by the seat of your pants. Go through and look at the songs, look at the styles, compare the differences in styles, and make some good decisions. Maybe write down some things. At the end of a song, write down what the new key signature is and the new time signature and so on of the song that's coming up. So you can start preparing for that early. I can't demonstrate this, obviously. To be honest with you, I forget to write things down myself. But in general, you just have to know what's coming up and plan a little bit. Number 2, work on your modulations. Now the modulations, as I said on the blog, we can talk about modulations all day and we can get really cute and fancy with modulations, and there's a place for that. But in church, we don't really need fancy modulations. We just need modulations that work and are not confusing and that stay in time and so on. So in a lot of respects, I really think you should sort of maybe dumb down modulations a little bit. You don't have to pull out the fancy stuff. Just do something that's not confusing, that's pretty quick, and that works. And I'll tell you what I do 9 times out of 10. I'm going to sort of tell on myself here. 9 times out of 10, I just do a 2-5-1 into the new key. And when I say 2-5-1, I mean I play a 2 chord in the new key, a 5, and then a 1 chord in the new key. For example, let's say I end a song in the key of G, so I play a G chord. Okay, so all I really need to do is play, I'm in the key of G, so let's say I'm going to the key of F. What I really need to do is play the 2 chord in the key of F, which is G minor, and then C7 in the new key, which is F, the 5 chord is C7, and then 1. Okay, so I play G minor 2, C7 5, 1. Okay, so this is how it sort of sounds in real life. 1, G minor, C7, F. Did you hear that? Very simple, but it works. And guess what? Usually it will. It really will usually sound really good and work perfectly. Again, you won't win awards, but it will absolutely do the job that it was supposed to do. 2-5-1 in the new key. By the way, good thing for you to do. Learn your 2-5-1s in every key, or at least the keys that you play a lot in. So when you come to a spot and you have to do a quick modulation, you don't have to think about it. You know what the 2 chord is in the new key and the 5 chord and so on. That'll really pay off, not just with modulations, but with a lot of other things down the road. All right, number 3, do your transitions early. Okay, all that stuff, time signatures, key signatures, style, tempo, start changing it early. Now, you don't know how long the transition is going to be, right? We never know. It depends on how long the worship leader talks in a lot of cases between songs. So you don't want to get into a situation where you're trying to time it and you mistime it and the congregation starts singing in the middle of your modulation. Okay, so that's a train wreck. We all know that, right? So you want to avoid that. I recommend that you get the transition out of the way very, very early. How early? Well, I usually get it out of the way within a couple bars, And very often I start the modulation before the first song is even done. Not the modulation, I start the transition. I can't change the key in the middle of the previous song. But on the very last chord of the first song, I can already start changing the tempo and the style. For example, here I'm going to start slowing down. Did you hear what I did? On the very last bar of the first song, I started slowing down the tempo right there, and I had the modulation out of the way and everything else out of the way in just a couple of bars. Okay? Now, we'll talk about what to do once you finish the transition and you're waiting for the next song to start. We'll talk about that here in a second. But you get the transition out of the way early for a couple reasons. First of all, like I just said, you don't really know how long the transition is going to be in the first place. In other words, how long the song leader is going to talk. So just be safe, get it out of the way. Secondly, the sooner you get it out of the way, the more time the congregation will have to adjust to the new world, so to speak, the new key, the new style and tempo and so on. So getting that out of the way is really, really helpful. Okay, that brings us to number 4. Number 4 is the filibuster music. Once you get the transitional stuff done, what do you do with the rest of the transition? Well, we sort of filibuster. Filibuster is an American term, political term, for just sort of fill the time with anything. And so we're going to fill the time normally by playing some sort of chord progression in the new key. It can be as simple as just a 1 chord. You can play any material up top of it you want. You can do that for a while, not too long, and it starts to sound really sort of drony and boring. Sometimes I hear musicians hang out on 1 chord forever, and usually it doesn't sound good, but once in a while you hear a musician that does such interesting stuff on top of that chord, it actually works very well. But in general, you probably don't want to stay on the 1 chord for more than a couple bars. Here's another one that I use a lot. I go from 1 to 4 over 1. Okay, so in this case I'm playing an F chord, which is 1, and then I play a B flat chord over 1. Okay, so 1, 4 over 1. You can do you don't have to be that fancy. Okay, so let's sort of go all the way through it. Okay, so we're going to be in the old song. Here's the transition starting. G minor, C7, F. Now I'm just going to keep going to 4 over 1, B flat over F, back to the F. And then the song might start, or maybe not. Maybe you have to keep playing that material. Other progressions I use 6, 2, 5, 1 a lot. In this case it would be D minor, G minor, C7, and F. So it would sound like this. Here's D minor, G minor, C7, maybe it's time to start now, and so on. Okay, so any progression you want to use will work just fine. I use some more complicated ones. Those are ones that they're sort of my go-to progressions. You don't have to go that fancy. And really, if you just stick with what I've given you so far, you'll be in great shape for almost any particular situation. So you come out of the old song, you transition quickly, then you play filibuster music. That brings us to point 5, which is what do you do then? How do you get your song leader to know to start the next song? How do you cue him that you're ready for him to start? It's a two-way communication, right? It doesn't matter how good you are as a musician. It doesn't matter how good the worship leader is. Bottom line is, until you learn to communicate, you're probably not going to work so well together. And you don't communicate verbally. Sometimes you communicate with head nods a little bit. But really, if you're really good, you should be able to communicate with your music itself. And I'll show you a few quick ways to do that. One of the things I like to do is I use the same chord at the end of a lot of my transitions to sort of cue him that it's time to start. I use a suspended dominant a lot, which some of you guys know as a 4/5 chord. In the key of F is this. I would be playing B flat in the right hand over C in the left hand. That's a chord that screams, I'm ready to start. And when the song leader hears that, very often, if they're ready to start too, they'll start. Normally the song starts on a 1 chord, so that's a perfect chord to get it into there. Okay, so we're basically going like this, filibustering. There's the chord, okay, and they're ready to start. By the way, sometimes you don't have to give a cue chord. If you're just playing this, they can pretty much start whenever they want to. However, if you have a plan where you want them to start at a certain time, one of the things that you can do is you can sort of maybe either make it a little busier or bring up the volume a little bit, or maybe throw a little rhythm in there or something. Okay, something like that. I do that a lot even with my suspended dominant. Just bring up the volume a little bit or accent a few notes, and that'll let them know that you're at a place where you feel comfortable starting. Remember, you both have to be on the same page. Ultimately, they're deciding when to start, but that doesn't mean you can't help them know when a good place to start would be, if that makes sense. Two-way street. No dictatorships in church, hopefully. That brings us to the last tip, which is this. What happens if the song leader misses your cue to start, or they just think, this is not when I want to start, I want to talk some more? What do you do in those situations? Well, it's very simple. You just come back to the same place. Now, you have to either have the ear for it, or you have to understand a little bit how music works to do this. Assuming that you may not play this by ear, let me tell you how the music works. If you're playing a suspended dominant, for example, we already said that chord likes to resolve to the 1 chord. So if you're playing like this and they don't come in, go ahead and resolve to the 1 chord anyway, and then just find a way back to that chord, which could be as simple as just going right back to it. That sounds fine. I usually will play the 2 chord in front of that suspended dominant. Which sounds like that. There's all kinds of different ways that you can circle back, but you want to find a way to circle back to the same chord using a chord progression. The one I'm sort of playing here is I get to the suspended dominant. If they don't come in, I'm going to play 1, then 2, and then back to the suspended dominant. So it's like a little rotation, 3 chords in a row, and eventually they'll start. Okay, so I give them a cue, but they don't come in. Well, I'm just going to circle back to here's a 2, 5, they miss it again, back to the 1, 2, and then the songs, they finally get on the same page and you're good to go. Just circle back. Don't get worried, don't stress, just circle back and you'll get back to where you need to be. That's the end of my tips for today. Hope that was useful to you. And I hope that helps you in your church as you do what you do so well in your church. I hope to see you on the blog and other places where I'm sharing more tips, and I'll talk to you later.